I remember my first full-time job I got as an exercise professional. Well, back in those days, it was back in the 80s, we called them gym instructors because personal training didn't actually exist. And I was very proud, and I just finished my degree, and during my degree I had a number of part-time positions as gym instructors in different gyms, and those gyms were more bodybuilding type gyms because back in the 80s that's how the fitness profession started, pretty much with the bodybuilding gyms. Then came in the aerobics, and later gyms became more professional. We started calling them health clubs, and now they are what they are today. But my first position as a full-time gym instructor, and I was called to my first staff meeting, and I was the new kid on the block, and there were a whole bunch of other people who were gym instructors. Now, I had a university degree, which is very rare in those days because there's only a small number of universities running a exercise science degree. I did a Bachelor of Human Movement Studies, and so Deb McCoy, the manager, was quite proud that she had a person on her team who had a degree, where all the rest didn't necessarily have any degrees, any qualifications, and at best a 1 weekend or maybe a 2 weekend fitness leader program or fitness leader certificate. And I'd been there for a short period of time, and she was going around and she was asking questions about the staff and how we're all going, and then she asked me a question about a program that I'd written and asked me to explain to the group why I'd prescribed that exercise. And I felt a little bit pressured, a little bit under the hammer, a little bit insecure, and a little bit defensive because I felt that she was questioning my exercise as if there was something wrong with it. So in my defensive mode, I explained in a very unanatomical, biomechanical, physiological point of view why I prescribed that exercise. And if you're wondering what it was, I was doing an incline alternating dumbbell bicep curl with rotation. And I didn't really know what to say. I knew they wanted some form of intellectual answer to, and the best I could come up with was something which I'd read in the old Muscle and Fiction magazines back in those days, because I did have a background in bodybuilding and bodybuilding gym. So I just came up with something that sounded quite impressive, but also confusing. So confusing that it would confuse them that they wouldn't know what I was talking about, therefore they couldn't question what I was talking about. So I thought I'd just confuse them, and that way it would get them off my back. So I came up with, well, when you're on the incline, that lengthens the bicep, and as you go back, it lengthens the bicep, training in the full lengthened position. As you come up, you need to rotate to get the peaking contraction at the top, and then you've got to pronate all the barrel the way in the back to get the lengthening, and that's where you're going to work the bicep through the full range, not just through the partial range, and work the full bicep, not just parts of the bicep. And it sounded very impressive, and Deb McCoy said, wow, thank you so much for explaining that. And they took the bait. You know, they believed what I just said, and I didn't really know what I really said, but it just sounded impressive. And I sort of got bits and pieces from different magazines or things that I'd heard, pieced them all together into a big explanation, threw it out there, and I got away with it. And first of all, they said, wow, you know, that's why you've got a Bachelor of Human Movement Studies. That's why you have on our team. You're going to be the head programmer and leader of this team. And what was interesting is after that, when I walked away, I sort of felt dirty. I sort of thought, wow, you know, yes, I got away with it, but, you know, I really conned my way. I just virtually lied my way out of it, and they believe what I said, and I don't even know what I said, so how can I even believe it? So that was one of those embarrassing moments where you put onto the spot and you have to justify what you're doing, and everyone expects you knew what you're doing, because not only did you have the badge as a gym instructor, but I also have letters after my name with the Bachelor of Human Movement Studies. And that sort of spurred me on. It says, yeah, I went through 3-4 years, it took me 4 years to get through university, a Bachelor of Human Movement Studies, and I came out not really remembering anything that I actually learnt in that time period, because the way I went through it, I memorised it, regurgitated it onto an exam paper to get the test ticked off, and I got the piece of paper, but I didn't actually acquire any knowledge. But more importantly, I didn't actually acquire any depth of understanding of that knowledge and the application of that in a functional way. So after that, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, be in the exercise profession for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, for the rest of my life, because that was what I was passionate about, that's the only thing I loved, then best I know what I'm talking about, and best I start to understand what I'm talking about, so whatever question by my gym manager or a client or a doctor or a physio, then I can actually come up with something better than I scrapped together from muscle and fiction magazines and the bodybuilding magazines and razzle-dazzle them with confusion. And I don't want to sort of go through my profession walking on thin ice of understanding, where at any stage I could trip over and fall through the ice and fall over and trip over my own words, particularly when I eventually came up with someone who really knew what they were talking about. So that's when I decided to commit myself to learning all about anatomy and physiology. And it's interesting, I just got off the phone to one of my graduates, Brett, and well, he's not graduated yet, but he's early in the stages and he's learning his anatomy, and he just rang me out because he just could not believe what he was seeing being prescribed and performed in the gyms. He says, do these people even know what's going on? They're personal trainers or they're whatever they are, and they're given these exercises which they're not just necessarily inefficient, they're not necessarily effective, but they also can be quite dangerous. And look, and I'm not going to speak too soon because I've been there where I was just copying everyone else, looking at what everyone else is doing and just doing an average of that. And looking at the magazines and doing what they were doing, because back then we didn't have social media. But now with social media and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, you have access to massive amounts of stuff when it comes to other people's opinions and training philosophies and training principles and programs and views. And unless you have a good understanding of anatomy and physiology and biomechanics and the fundamentals of physics and chemistry, you're going to very easily get led down someone else's garden path. And Brett was very appreciative that when he's learning in the program, that he's learning about anatomy, we can apply that to any exercise in the gym. And when he's looking at other people doing the exercise, he's saying, well, that's going to be damaging, or that's going to be unsafe because of this reason or that reason, from an anatomical, physiological and a biomechanical point of view. So one of the challenges we have is because this profession is a great profession. We know that exercise is the best intervention for people's health to fight off against disease, whether that be physiological and physical or psychological and mental. Is the greatest intervention. It is the cure for most challenges in the world today when it comes to physical disease and mental disease. And it's such a fantastic intervention. It's a great form of medicine. Exercise is medicine and medicine is exercise. But like medicine, we have to know what's in the tablet or what in the prescription and what dosage to take and how often to take it, so it doesn't just solve the challenge, but it doesn't create a new challenge. So a lot of the time in this profession, trainers are looking at what everyone else is doing and thinking, well, they're confident in doing it, or they got big biceps, or they're really lean and ripped, or they look like they're doing the right thing because they look right, and they're just copying everyone else without actually questioning it. So, my suggestion is to, before you start copying anyone else, is start to question yourself in terms of, haven't I questioned my knowledge and the opinions that I offer my personal training clients or friends or family? And rather than seek new knowledge, start to question your current knowledge first. Is, do I really know what I'm talking about? If I was asked by a physiotherapist, a chiropractor, a sports physician, or orthopedic surgeon, someone who has had a lot more training than me, when ideally would have a better, deeper understanding of anatomy and physiology, because that's more their space when it comes to, say, surgery or rehabilitation. If they question me on the exercises that I'm prescribing, and they ask me to justify that from an anatomical and a physiological point of view, would I feel comfortable in my answer, or would I be just giving a superficial answer based on something which I heard or read, or something that I've seen everyone else doing? So before you start copying everyone else, start to look at what you're doing and say, okay, why am I doing this? And that's how I started. I started, in my exercise prescription. I say, why am I doing this exercise? What is the benefit of this? Why am I doing it, and how does it work? Why am I doing it, and how does it work? And a nice little principle to go through when you're analysing exercises is, first of all, ask yourself the bigger picture: why am I prescribing? Is it for fat loss? Is it for building muscle, for strength and speed and power? And what particular muscles? What is the target area, and what benefits do I want out of it? So what is the target area and what is the benefit? So you get that established first. Then you go through a typical anatomical process of analysing that exercise. So when you look at that exercise, is that exercise is training those muscles that match in to that benefit or supposed benefit? Is that tapping into the physiology of the energy timeline or the energy source of the substrate utilization? Is it tapping into the neural drive? Is it stimulating the hormonal system in the way that's going to get that outcome to serve that benefit? So rather than say, hey, this exercise burns fat, it says, well, how does that exercise burn fat? Does it put you in the aerobic energy system? Is it a high expenditure exercise? Does it utilize fat as a source of energy? Is it utilizing carbohydrate as a source of energy, or what combination? What energy system does it sit in? Is it phosphate, lactate, or aerobic? What is the substrate utilization, or what macronutrients are being used? What are the metabolic byproducts, and how does that work, and how does that affect your metabolism? How does it affect your respiratory quotient? And ask all of those questions, and then you're going to start to dig deeper and get a better understanding of, well, maybe this exercise may not be the best exercise for fat loss. Because in the early years, I used to prescribe crunches for burning fat off the tummy. But as we know, that crunches is not an aerobic activity, it's a low energy expending activity, it's not very functional, and it certainly doesn't burn fat off the tummy, and it's certainly, now there's no such thing as spot reduction. So that was one of the examples of an exercise which was just one of those anchored type exercises in every program. You finish off with crunches to tone up your abs, burn off the fat and get a flat tummy. And from an anatomical physiological point of view, it makes absolutely no sense. Not as a anatomically incorrect, it's physiologically incorrect, and it's functionally incorrect, and it actually can be over time can be detrimental to the health of your lower back by causing that flexion, extension, compression forces on your L4, L5, S1 in your lower back. So when you start to question at that deeper level, if it's a strength training exercise, it does the load appropriate that's going to stimulate the required motor units, the types of motor units, the frequency of firing those motor units, the fast twitch fibers or the slow twitch fibers. Does it have a high neural drive, and does it have a high force output development of muscular tension? Does it place the stimulus in the phosphate system, which is going to get the right stimulus to promote muscle size and strength? If you go through all those processes of digging deeper into the exercise from an anatomical physiological point of view, then it's a great way to self-educate yourself and be able to teach yourself how to analyze exercises and see them for what they are, rather than the misty dust of marketing and opinion that surrounds them that you hear in the profession. So be able to blow the dust away with anatomy and physiology and biomechanics and fundamentals of chemistry and obviously physics, then you're going to get a deeper understanding. And my suggestion is, if you're going to spend the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years doing this, then why not get a deeper understanding? You are an exercise professional. Professional means that you know what you're talking about. Your opinion is based on anatomy and physiology and research and science and the fundamental principles of those, and you'll be able to express them and communicate them not just to yourself but also to your clients, rather than just being the average of everyone else. And when some new trendy or fashionable exercise comes along, you grab it, you say, what's this for? And they say, this is great for power, or this is great for function, or this is great for stability, this is great for bodybuilding, this is great for toning. And you just believe it rather than say, okay, let's take that toning or power or strength and what are the things that make up that? And what is toning, and what is strength, and how's it measured, and how's it created in the body? And then if you do that, then you're going to start to work out what is fact and what is fiction. And on the side of that, not only sometimes that it may work the muscle, then you go even deeper and say, what does it do to the joints, and what does it do to the ligaments, and what does it do to the cartilage, and what does it do to the meniscus, and what does it do to the bone, and then see if there's any detrimental effect of that, because sometimes you can train the muscle while compromising the joints. So a lot of exercise in the gym, people look at muscles and go, okay, let's throw a weight at that, let's throw an exercise at that, and that works the muscle from an odd position or an odd angle or an odd movement pattern. And you say, yeah, I feel it in the muscle, but also it can be detrimental to the joint because it's working the joint in a very dysfunctional way, or applying a stress across the joint, creating shearing forces or rotational forces or too much compression forces, and you're getting a great muscular workout, but you're also detrimenting, it's detrimental and compromising to the joint. So you're building the muscle while wearing out the joints, and if you're short-sighted, you're not going to see that down the track you're going to wear that joint out, and you're not going to be able to work the muscle anyway. So yeah, you might get short-term benefits, but ultimately when it comes to exercise, we want to have them long-term benefits. If you want to go into some form of medication, you don't want short-term benefits and long-term side effects, then that's not really a safe medication. And when we prescribe exercise, we are prescribing a medication. We are prescribing a physiological response, because every exercise will create a physiological response to training. We're loading the muscles that are activated from the nervous system, activates the muscles, it pulls on the bones, and in that process you will get a stimulus on the cardiovascular system, you get a stimulus on the respiratory system, you get a stimulus on the hormonal system. On all of those systems you will create a physiological change into your body that will be conducive to either catabolic or anabolic, by releasing those hormones and firing those motor units and activating those muscles. And that will either be conducive for stimulate the overcompensation process, where the body will take that stress that's been placed on it, that controlled stress, and will adapt and get stronger and get better to make yourself a better version of yourself, even though that's a fascinating term, a better physiological version of yourself, so you can cope with that stress again. However, if that stress is applied in the wrong intensity, or the wrong frequency, or the wrong angle, with the wrong stress, then you can get side effects of overtraining. You can get side effects of joint challenges, muscle challenges, tendon challenges, ligament challenges, and then that's going to be a short-term benefit and a long-term consequence. So when you're going to go through this path in this fantastic profession, my suggestion is question everything. First, question your current knowledge. Question if something comes out your mouth, and that gives someone the right to question it. So if anything comes out, well, this is great for the core, this is great for function, this is great, then always ask yourself, if someone says, well, why is it good for the core, and how does that work from an anatomical, physiological point of view? And if you find that you're stumbling over, you're mumbling, then maybe you should go dig deeper into that statement that you made and see if that statement is actually a reflection of the truth. Even though everyone else is saying it, doesn't mean it's right. 5 million people saying a dumb thing doesn't mean it's not a dumb thing. So you have to be strong to question all the obvious things, and once you question the obvious things, you get a deeper understanding. Then you can spread that to other things, and you're going to see new things coming into the profession. I've been doing this now as an exercise professional now for 38 years, and so I said to Brett today, can you imagine the number of things I've seen in my 38 years as an exercise professional, who's travelled throughout over 60 different countries and been to a countless number of gyms and personal training studios and seen what I've seen. You can imagine some of the crazy stuff that I've seen. I've also seen some really great stuff, but I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. And all the people doing the great stuff and the people doing the crazy stuff is wearing the same badge, means a personal trainer. So they're two people in two extremes, and that's why we like to call you an exercise professional. You're not just a personal trainer, because unfortunately that puts you into that bucket of the crazy stuff that people are doing, whether they're unqualified personal trainers or qualified personal trainers. Ultimately, they can be very ignorant or naive personal trainers, and sometimes arrogant personal trainers, unfortunately, because they think they know but they don't know. But they speak as if they know, and they speak very confidently. You understand, some people can be sincerely, confidently wrong with the information they give. So if you believe their sincerity and their confidence, then that's the challenge, and that's what people think. Wow, they're so confident and they're sincere with it, but you can be sincerely, confidently wrong. Because we were sincerely confident that the earth used to be flat until a crazy man called Christopher Columbus questioned it to the Spanish and said, yeah, the earth is not flat, I think it's round, and he became an outcast until it was proven to be round when he discovered America, if we go back in history. Because everything that we know now was once questioned. And many times the things that we think now, if you question the things that you think now, then that will make you better at what you do. So get a deeper understanding, and every time you revise, and that's why Max would give you a life education, because you can go over and over and over it. The number of times I've been through anatomy and physiology is countless, but every time I go over it, I get a deeper understanding of it, and that makes me more confident in it, and more, and also humble, because the more I know, the more I realise I don't know. So many times there aren't black and white answers. I can just give you the best answer based on what I know now, but I'm also very open for discussion and very open for questions to get me even thinking deeper about it, and I'm very happy to change my mind, because an opinion is something which is just, it can go to or fro depending on the information that you're given. But make sure that opinion doesn't turn into a belief, because you're more likely to defend a belief because it's your belief, and if it turns into a conviction, then that belief becomes a part of you, and not only do you defend it, you fight for it because you think that people are questioning you. You know, when I first started with a bachelor degree working in lifestyle gym as the only person with the degree, and I was questioned, I got defensive rather than open my up and said, hey, that's a great question, or this is what I think. However, I'm very open for other people's views to see what they think, and let's discuss this from not from a result point of view or an outcome point of view, but let's go back to the process. And let's analyse why I'm putting on myself an incline with an incline curl and doing the rotation. How's that work? How does it affect the muscles across the shoulder joint? What are the muscles across the shoulder joint? Well, the muscles of the deltoid. And you have the biceps, which is a biarticulate muscle that originates in the anterior superior glenoid cavity, and the long head attaches to the coracoid process. Therefore, yeah, we're going to get a bit more stretch there. And if I go into a supinated grip, then that's going to give me a direct line of pull between the origin and insertion, because the insertion is on the radial tuberosity, which is the proximal anterior part of the not tibia, radius. And then if I go and I rotate it back and forth, and that's going to rotate the ulna around the radius, and that's going to affect the insertion point of the biceps brachii and put it in a weaker or a stronger position, or make the muscles a bit shorter or longer. And not only that, doing a bicep curl is not a very functional exercise. There's not many aspects in life, or many things in life that you do any form of bicep curl in an isolated way, let alone sitting on an incline bench with your shoulder in an extended position with your elbow in a hyperextended position doing a curl. Plus, also because it's an isolated exercise, it creates those shearing forces across the elbow joint that can be detrimental to the wear and tear and the integrity of the elbow joint and the tendon of the bicep over a period of time. So it's not functional, and if it's done with a load repeatedly over a period of time, you could over time wear out the elbow joint and increase the chance of a tendonitis in the biceps brachii. And at least then I'm going through a process on anatomy of the biomechanics of that movement, rather than just saying, well, this works the muscle and makes it longer or makes it more peaking and all sorts of stuff, where peaking of a muscle is really only determined by the length of the tendons on both ends of the muscle belly. And so people who have longer tendons will have more of a peak, and people with shorter muscle tendons will have a more lengthened muscle belly, which means they're not going to get as much of a peak. Can I change that? No, because that goes against one of the characteristics of muscle, which is the elasticity of the muscle. You can lengthen and shorten a muscle, but it will always return to its resting shape and length. So there I'm just throwing out some. Now, obviously back then I'd learned all that at university, but I didn't join the dots, and I didn't even remember the dots to join them. So it's important to really know those things, because then that's going to help you in evaluating and analysing exercise, whether it be a strength training exercise or a cardiovascular exercise or a functional exercise or a stretching exercise or a sporting exercise. And one of the things which was very beneficial, once I learned that, I used to work with Olympic sporting teams, and a lot of the sports that I dealt with, I never played the sport, which is a good thing because I wasn't tainted by tradition. Well, this is how it's always done. So I went in there with virgin eyes or fresh eyes and saw it purely from an anatomical, physiological point of view, and made some decisions that went against the tradition. This is the way we've always done it. Well, just because they've always done it doesn't mean it's right. Just because we do it for 100 years doesn't mean it's right. However, let's look at ways to make it better, to make it more effective, make it more efficient, make it more enjoyable, make it more relative, but most of all, make it more safe. And that's the ultimate, because if it's not safe, then they're not going to be doing it for very long. So I guess what I'm saying is know your stuff. It is a journey of stuff. It's an unlimited amount of stuff. It's like the universe. It's endless. But if you just keep layering your knowledge and thickening the thick ice underneath you, then you're going to stand strong with confidence, not worrying about falling through the ice when someone questions you, where you say, well, this is the why and this is how it works. However, I'm still open to learn more about how it works, because I need to have a certain level of understanding, and I'm always digging deeper down that world to increase my depth of understanding, which is endless.